All right, welcome to the LAP online meetup. It's April 2023, and Jonathon Fishman, the CEO of LeanLaw, is here, and he is going to discuss the tech stack. The basic gist is you guys, the LAPs, do not have to be the expert. We also have Andrew Schear here from Bloomfield Networks. He is the expert, so we're going to talk about how law firms can create best-in-breed technology rather than all-in-one practice management, so that they use and are delighted with all the technology that they use. Jonathon, take it away.
Well, first, it's such a small group. Highway, I already said my hellos to Jeff and Andrew. It's great to see you. So it's a small little group here. I really want to just have this be a conversation about where LeanLaw is happening, or what's happening from a tech stack and integrations perspective, and just mostly share it with Jeff and Lee, and let Andrew get caught up in our thinking. The reason I asked Andrew to come into this meeting is, as we think about the vision of LeanLaw as a platform, we are resolute in staying true to our way of being financially focused. But we also believe in the concept of best in breed. Our clients want to do more with less, and they don't want all-in-one packages. They really come to us and they say, we just don't want that big honking beast of a practice management tool. Yet they need certain functionality, whether that be court rules or Microsoft 365 integration, or integration into another industry product that's niche specific to their practice. So there's lots of different ways of tools that they want to interact with. And to date, LeanLaw has been pretty awful at it, candidly. I mean, we've really been primitive in how we've done our integrations. And that's changing. We just finished a round of capital. That gives us some extra resources. And one of the things that we did is hire a product manager. And one of the things he did is identify integrations as a key step. So there's two, just looking ahead on the roadmap, there's two really awesome things that are happening to LeanLaw. One in this quarter and one should be in the next quarter. The first is we're building in an embedded reporting layer. So one of the shortcomings of LeanLaw today is that data is not very configurable to a specific law firm. You can export it really easily to Excel, but it's not very configurable. There's no dashboards. And there's a lack of us extracting data and bringing it to people versus people having to go get data. And so instead of trying to write everything from scratch, we're in the midst of finalizing a decision on what's called an embedded data layer. What that means is it's almost like a glue between the data and a different type of graphical interface. And it allows us a lot more flexibility and functionality as to how we can interact with data from an engineering product development perspective, but also translates to the end user. And so kind of three things that we look at. One is going to be some very basic core features, our core product features, which is just leveling up, having a more visual approach to what a dashboard might look like for a timekeeper or for some other firm players. And our core product will have a very primitive version of this. Our pro product will then have a version that has some configurations for the specific firm, so they can actually tune some things and say, okay, I want these data points for my attorney dashboard. I want these data points for my timekeeper dashboard. And even users can come in and potentially customize their own. And so that sort of advanced feature. The third is going to be what we're calling, it's not a good name yet, but it's an insights product. And that's going to be the ability to really go in and take multiple data sources and put together dashboards. So on the financial side, Jeff and Lee, you could think of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if an attorney could see comp tracking from LeanLaw, comp tracking in LeanLaw that they earn from others, salary, which could be W-2 or just Schedule K kind of salary, HSA contributions, 401k contributions, health benefits, or some mashup of that. Well, 401k and HSA might be coming from third-party resources, but this platform will allow you the capacity to stitch them things in. So we're gonna do a launch of that in Q2 with the core and pro version of it, and then what will follow is some of this level up and reporting. But it's gonna just significantly change our reporting. To the subject at hand today, going into Q3, we're doing the same tool I'm going to share my screen, Elizabeth, if that's okay. We're going to do the same thing with a tool. I asked someone to think that looks something like this. These are the two that we're considering. So this one's called Prismatic, and I'm not leading these, so I'm not an expert on it. This one's called Paragon. But it kind of summarizes that it allows you to very easily connect with many different tools. So the idea is they're integration platforms that were built for companies like LeanLaw. So instead of us going and developing a full, what's called API, and then going to each tool, Microsoft 365 or FileVine or some other tool, and having to do all this work, essentially it connects it in a in a more efficient way, so that we have it's almost like Zapier for LeanLaw. And I'm going to show you Zapier. So this is very exciting because this will allow us to then start a model that we can really begin to build off of a basic integration and a premium. So there'll be core integrations in LeanLaw like Microsoft 365 and Google Apps for Work. Then there might be some premium integrations like a document management system, iManage or something like that, that we say, okay, here's that. And LeanLaw will actually, FileVine is another example, where LeanLaw will actually build out a more custom interface and custom connection to an application that we think is premium. But then it leaves the flexibility, and this is why I invited Andrew to the conversation, for folks like Andrew to work with you folks and our LeanLaw clients to begin to create a topology of tools that the law firm needs to work with that. So I'll give you an analogy on this. If what the accounting and bookkeeping community is for financials, a trusted advisor understands the business objectives, lays in foundational workflows, but then maintains and is there to understand the business and begin to expand and make it better. That's what you folks are doing for your clients, right? But then have this ongoing relationship to make sure that the solutions are working. Andrew does the same thing on the technical side. And so Andrew and I've talked about this, but Andrew and I are having, I know Andrew, we haven't talked in a while about this, but I've always had Andrew sort of earmarked to do outsourced technical integration for LeanLaw clients, having known all of our essentially integration platforms to do that. And so he's someone, and I brought him to the conversation just to speak to, he's worked with one of our clients and has worked with LeanLaw, knows its strengths and weaknesses at this point, but understands where it wants to go and how he's consulting and working with that company. So I'm kind of putting you on the spot, Andrew, but the idea was I wanted him to kind of share his experience, not necessarily with LeanLaw, but in working with law firms and helping them create the right tech stack. And before I cue you up, Andrew, just introduce yourself and give a little bit. Our belief at LeanLaw is that we want to be the financial core, and we think of what can we integrate with, what can we automate, and what are the data opportunities. The cross section of those three tenets is our genius. It's our unique. It's what makes us unique in the marketplace. We want to own the financial stack, right? We want to own those workflows and integrate with the best of breed tools. And we're not naive to think that our clients need some practice management. So this data layer that I put up and talked about is what's going to enable that, but it's only going to be actualized by people like Andrew, who can work with you guys or have the client and say, hey, this is how we stitch in a third-party tool. This is how we take in an integration and make it smarter, and not necessarily just buy an all-in-one, but rather pick tools and create workflows that are really specific to what the law firm needs and wants, versus taking generic stuff and forcing them to do manual behaviors to accommodate it. Does that make sense, Andrew? Kind of like the way you think?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, the stuff you brought up with Paragon and the other integration platforms is super exciting. I think it's, going to mean a lot for LeanLaw and the different accounting partners that are here. Just to kind of tell everybody a little bit about me, we're based in New Jersey. We're an IT managed service provider. And, that means a lot of things. It means, dealing with Wi-Fi and networking and internet and opening new offices and cabling. But it also means, working with clients on figuring out, as Jonathan said, in the way that you do, how to best use the tools that are available to them efficiently and scale their businesses and operate smoothly. So, everything that John is showing us, I think, is very exciting, because a lot of the law firms I encounter, and I'm sure you do too, they either have very, very primitive ways of doing things, a staff full of people that are, might even still be working with paper, or, using outdated tools, or they're not using the tools that they have to the fullest capability. We've had lots of clients who invest in, on-premise server-based solutions, and they don't use a tenth of the capability. They use it as a very rudimentary database of clients, when, there's really so much more that can be done from a billing and reporting perspective to monitor the financial health of the firm and be efficient. So, that I think will be huge, as the role that tech will play in LeanLaw expanding, and knowing, what we can bring to the table for your clients.
Yeah, and I think what's important, Andrew, and if you talk about, and Lee and Jeff, you guys can talk about your experience, but it's really honing in on, the change management that has to happen. I mean, so many of these clients come off of like such, you said, and really
antiquated, right? I'm really glad you said that. It's the knowing how to come into an environment, understand the baseline of where people are today, and how to gracefully move them into a new and more modern way of doing things, because especially the firms that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years are very resistant to change, and they don't realize how much these tools can help them. And additionally, just speaking from my experience in the technology world, it wasn't that long ago that John and I remember looking at the same background I'm looking at now, where we were saying, we have a problem at our law firm, right? And it's compensation tracking, right? And LeanLaw is the only one that could really deliver, the dynamic compensation tracking that this particular firm needed, and what many firms are also need, but are relying on staff and Excel sheets that aren't linked together, and a whole messy thing to accomplish. So that part that Jonathan mentioned about being able to understand the baseline, unwind it, and gracefully plan and implement a new solution, I think will be huge in the future.
And I want to just ask Lee and Jeff, since you guys are here and we're having this conversation, are you guys in your law firms I know you see the inefficiency. I'm not talking about accounting and bookkeeping. I'm talking about like tech infrastructure. And are you being asked or being sort of dragged into conversations where almost it's not IT in the classic sense of break fix, but it's software, it's essentially best practices, right? Because you start to talk about practice management or even financial management like LeanLaw, and you're talking about email, and talking about documents, you're talking about onboarding clients. It starts to talk about the flow and life cycle of the client. So I'm curious if you guys are dragged in. I mean, Jeff, you and I were having a recent interaction with that small client. I don't know where they are, but they feel pretty backwards, just based on my instinct from the outside in. I'm just sort of curious how you guys get there. And I know there's probably some IT professional already there, but I suspect most of the time it's break fix.
Yeah, I mean, going back a little bit, like we had talked about with the client you and I discussed a few times there, working through some issues, there's some just like generic best practices as a business that needs to be implemented as well. And, I didn't start in the legal world. I don't have any legal training myself. I'm a bookkeeper, right? So from that front, but I also help with doing, some outsourced CFO type services. And so I get asked a lot about how to do things to help the business. So I'm saying, hey, you need to implement certain things. But the thing that I found several times, and my best example is my father. He was a dentist who loves to practice dentistry, and he absolutely hated having a dental practice because he hated the business. He just wanted to go do dentistry. And I find that we have some similarities with a lot of law firms where they just want to practice law and do what they do best and don't want to deal with all the other ancillaries. So they'll come to me and they've been at one of the, all-in-one or a close to type option. And, based on our recommendation or they found you themselves, have moved to LeanLaw. But then there's some things that they miss from their old system, and they're saying, I used to be able to click on something right here and it used to take me to this, and it's not part of the functionality that is what LeanLaw is specifically derived to be. And so being able to say, what would integrate great that would allow you to either stay in one spot and then be able to access that same data like you were bringing up here. And then now they can pull up that same information that they wanted. Maybe it's legal documents, their client management, you name it. I don't think they're worried about it must be all in one system, but I think if they could access that data through one system, through a portal, or for a lack of a better term, a way where they could be still in LeanLaw, but then can internally go into those files, those documents, whatever it is that they're seeking, would be really beneficial to be able to then also know who LeanLaw matches up with. Because I don't know what integrations exist or don't exist. And some of them want to bring their own thing to the table, and others are going, just tell me what I need, teach me it, and I want it to work. And that's kind of the pieces that I see anyway.
Yeah, when we talk about premium integrations, what that really means is that, when you're in a matter, you might have some 365 documents, for example, that are associated with a client matter. And we're just linking the name, basically you see the documents you link and it just clicks into the 365 environment. So we're just using web calls. There's a technical word for it, but web calls so that we can associate those documents. And that's where we're steering towards, because we recognize we never want to house those data, nor do we ever want to have a lot of workflow around those data. But we do recognize the importance that some of that data might be beneficial to be exposed. We will be putting some things in. Andrew, sounds like you have to say something, so I'll shut up in a sec. We will be putting some UX changes, some user interface changes shortly. And then as part of some of this work, adding notes, we're going to call them comments, but comments on all different facets of comments on invoices, comments on matters. That's the kind of number one thing that people want, that LeanLaw doesn't have from a practice management standpoint. The second that we hear a lot is calendar integration, and I'm going to actually show you a little Zapier integration that I use with LeanLaw that is available. It's not commercially available, but if you guys had a special client, we could potentially wire it up. Calendar integration with 365 and Google is the number two thing that people want. Having all the documents in one place, sometimes that's valuable. Sometimes people want it, and it's not the most important thing. They think it is because they're used to it, but in actuality, it's not. Andrew, you're going to say something?
Yeah, the two thoughts, just talking about integrations, right? Not like another with Office 365, it's not just document access and things like that, but if we can get to a place where there's an integration in Outlook that I can tag an email and immediately turn it into a time entry, right? I'm sure you've been asked for that. And another thing that just kind of crossed my mind listening to everybody is there was a really if you all know the book E-Myth, there's a version of that specifically for attorneys, and I read it as a non-attorney. And I feel like it gave me a lot of color into, a lot of the patterns that I've seen with our clients. And, Jeff, just with the great example you gave, your dad, he loved dentistry, but he hated running a business, right? And, these attorneys that we're servicing, they learned how to practice law, but they don't have a business class in law school. And, many of them are not good at it, right, to put it gently. So, that's... I just wanted to put that book out there if anybody was interested in it in our role, and just make the comment about that integration with email, as another exciting thing in the pipe.
I feel like the whole digital footprint on Microsoft. So I think calendar, email, documents, all three of those, and Teams is the fourth, right? The four major areas that we're looking. I mean, we'll do calendar to start with and then move on from there. And the idea is, where our grand vision of all of this, it'll take us a few years to get there, is that we want to have a digital footprint, or we want to interact with the digital footprint of the timekeeper such that we can use AI as an instrument to assess all the data that we collect, but then make suggestions on what the time should be, such that I wouldn't say auto capture time. I think that's overzealous, but the idea is to stage it in such a way that, this is very difficult on an iPhone, but on Android, looking at, text messages and sent calls as a time capture, looking in Outlook, looking in Microsoft Word, Teams, Calendar. All of that is where they live every day. I mean, I don't want to be Chrome Meta. If you guys are familiar with Chrome Meta, which is just like the minutia, what keystroke did you do? That's too detailed, but I have it stuck in my mind where this attorney, this was early in LeanLaw, like 2016, I was sitting in his office and I said, well, how do you capture your time? And he showed me at the end of the day, he looked at his recents in Word, his text messages sent, his emails sent, basically looked at the digital footprint of his day and extracted his time from that. And it's very easy for us to pull that data because it's happening and build it into it. But the first thing we have to do, Andrew, is we first have to connect it, right, to get the basic data. And then from there, we can start to build on advancements in terms of what we can capture. To Lee and Jeff, one of the reasons I wanted to invite Andrew in was he's a resource that can help your firms buy software. I think that's one of the shortcomings that folks have, that these law firms don't really know how to buy software well, and then when they buy it, they don't implement it well. And that's what I found Andrew to be very astute at as he led this law firm, is that he was the voice of the firm translating between what the workflows were, and he was knee deep. It wasn't really bookkeeping, accounting, it was contracting was driving that structure. But he was helping translate sort of what the product needed to do. We actually created a feature for this product, this company, this firm, and then helping steward the implementation, not on the bookkeeping and accounting per se, but on the sort of change management in the organization. Is that fair, Andrew, to say that?
Very fair. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. I want to show you guys a quick snapshot of what I'm talking about. So this is a new, let me pull it over and share my screen. This is just a style guide. It's not finished or anything. It's not final, but this is kind of where we're steering towards the next generation of our product. So simplifying the main header up here. Can everyone see this?
Yeah.
And moving it around kind of more what you're doing. You're capturing time and expenses, you're reviewing, you're billing, you're collecting, you might be distributing, you might be reporting, you might be onboarding. Onboarding is onboarding law firm clients. And then in here, you're seeing, here's a calendar event, and, here's some other time entry from yesterday. And so you're capturing all these things, and these are not necessarily live, meaning they need to be deemed that they're actually time entries, but we're capturing it from various places and then putting it on some type of calendar tool. And there's list view, calendar, and then the analysis is the AI that might come in and actually help you understand it. But so we really want to simplify the name navigation and make it more around what you're doing versus tasks, versus just like expenses. Or right now we have two time entry functions, calendar and time entries in our main navigation. I wonder if Gabe give me anything else here? He gave me, no, it's just that snapshot. So that's kind of, Andrew, what we're talking about is pulling that from other resources. And some of it might be emails, and really cleaning that up and allowing people to have a better interface. And you kind of see over here, there's some other navigation points here on the side. So instead of having it all vertical, moving some things to the side there. The last thing I wanted to show today, it's just a little integration I made with Zapier, because LeanLaw has an API. An API is a secure interface between us and something else. We use, QuickBooks is part of that API. We have a vendor, Apona, that is part of it, uses that API, and now Zapier is part of that API. And so what I did is I created a Zap that said, create a task, and oh, that was different. That was from Slack. So when I can tag something in Slack and it creates a task in my Google tasks, because I was getting overwhelmed with Slack, but it's this one, LeanLaw Cal integration. So if I click into this, Jeff and Lee, are you guys familiar with Zapier?
I have not used it, but I have seen it in action before.
So what it's doing is facilitating a happening from one application to the next. If I tag something in Slack, I can, in this instance, what I was saying before, create something in my Google Tasks. And it was trying to solve a problem for me. I was overwhelmed in Slack because there's so much coming at me. I needed to capture it as a task so I didn't lose it. So I used Zapier to connect Slack to my personal tasks, which doesn't naturally connect, right? There's no Google Task to Slack integration. At least I didn't know of it. So I use Zapier as an in-between. In this instance, I'm using Zapier that when a calendar event happens in my Google Calendar, that's the event, that's the trigger. An event's created, then create a time entry in LeanLaw. That's the pitching and catching, right? And there's some details here, like, show the start time of the time tracking when the event begins, show the time tracking when the event ends, and then add in the description the summary, which is the event. And this is all just easily scripted. These are things that happen. So that's the logic behind it. What it really means once I turn it on is that when you look at like my Friday Google Calendar, all of the time that's been embedded in my calendar matches my Friday. Let me just go to today. This Friday calendar, you can see last Friday, I had a sales meeting, a monthly all hands, a betterment introduction, Scott Heiss, financial planning, et cetera, et cetera. My LeanLaw calendar captured all of that in an automated way. And it's still very primitive. For me to make it work, I got to go in here and say, oh, that was sales, and save that. And it's great because it's all deemed non-billable. And I've got to go in and change the matter because I don't have enough sophistication in my two sides to exchange this with more detail, but it stages it all for me to use that. And this is an example of how happenings in one tool dictate time events in another tool. And this is live. I use this every day to track my time. And then that's now potentially billable time in LeanLaw. All this, if you look at my month calendar, the 17th, I had a big quarterly that day. So it tagged the whole thing. That whole meeting got tagged for me because I was in an offsite quarterly the entire day. And I can go in and edit it really easily and say, oh, that was operations, and yep, it was billable, save it. So I make one little note, I tied it to the right matter, and boom, I've got that time entry. So I just wanted to show you that this will get smarter. This is very primitive because I'm using, how do I say it, data tools, but it does show you how if I create a meeting. So as soon as this meeting's over today, so you can see today we have this meeting here, as soon as it completes, it'll show up in my calendar today. I had a board meeting this morning. That's already in my calendar. So I can come in, change this to operations. I'll make it billable, save it, and I now have billable time. So instead of me having to generate it, it just read my calendar. And that's just a glimpse of where we're headed, right? More automation, but smarter staging, right? We don't want it to be deemed billable time or non-billable time. We just want to stage it as these things happened. Now you get to convert them. And AI might help us suggest, hey, this is what the conversion is. And you can approve it. Kind of the same way that, how Lee and Jeff, how QuickBooks reads a bank feed and you still have to accept it, even though some of the AI is saying, or some of the smarts say, oh, this is this transaction, or we think it's this transaction. You still have to go in and approve it before it hits the general ledger. It's the same concept of how we're going to capture time, see it in a list view or some way to address it, and then allow that end user to capture it, to approve it. Okay. Comments, questions from the group?
Maybe this sounds very primitive and idiotic, but basically you use the Zap as an example, but I'm just trying to make sure that I understand that you're looking at using one of those integrations to allow LeanLaw to kind of be the hub for that, instead of having our clients then go use Zapier to do this themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that I was following.
No, that's a great question, Jeff, and it's exactly 100% correct. lit up Zapier because it's kind of a Swiss Army knife, and it has so many different integrations that we just lit it up because it was an easy lift as we were experimenting. But what we're going to use, how do I say it, a tool that's like Zapier, but instead of it having already talked to all these tools, it basically takes our middleware, our API, our ability to talk to them, and puts it on steroids so that we don't have to do a ton of work to get at some of the players that we want to do. But yes, you said it better than I did, Ashley. It's like a pro version of Zapier built for SaaS companies that want to integrate with other platforms.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of it will do. Again, I want to be really clear. Like Filevine is a great candidate for premium integration. We at LeanLaw would go to Filevine and say, hey, we want to write a premium integration because there are a lot of clients asking for that tool. We'll then think about not just client matter, but the data exchange. What data would be good in Filevine? What data should we pull back from Filevine? And then offer that as some type of premium integration for those clients that want it. 365 will be sort of baked in through the product, but we might have some very primitive features in 365 in the core product, and then some more advanced features in the pro product because we want people to be in pro. And then, but that's not a custom integration. That's just probably feature gaps between the two. And then we might have a third when Andrew comes in and says, hey, I really want to be in this tool. And we'd say, okay, we can write that. And we would just carve out some dollars to write it because Andrew's firm wants a very specific tool that he wants to be in. And we can then, instead of it costing 15 grand because we have to do all this custom API work, it would cost $1,500. It's a low level, or Andrew has the tools himself that he can script the connection on his own. I don't know where that will fall in the realm of things.
Yeah, it'll depend on the ask, it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Well, I covered what I wanted to cover today. Any questions, Jeff or Lee, from what we covered?
The only thing that jumps out at me right now is you had mentioned Epona, and I honestly don't know anything about them, but I've heard of them, and I've heard LeanLaw and you mentioned them before. I just wanted to know, what does that work, and is there an actual integration with them at this time, or is that something that's still separate?
So Epona, let me speak to that because it's a really neat tool. It's not quite as far as I'd like it. How do I say it? It's a really neat tool. They've been a little slow on their 365 integration. Let me kind of show you. I'm pulling up their site. Are you saying something, Elizabeth? Because you're muted.
Yeah, Jeff, you can also look at the case study for Jay Friedman. He uses Epona, and he loves it. He's like, I can onboard someone in 8 minutes, and it fills all of my folders, for in Microsoft 365, and it's all done, quickly. He got rid of his administrative assistant. He's just able to do it all on his own now. He's thrilled.
Yes. So here, I'll just put this little article in the chat for you guys. It's an article Elizabeth actually wrote with me sitting over her shoulder, helping her write it. So Epona's gig and what they created was this Epona DMS, they call it DMS for legal, DMS for office. I think it's it's this one. So DMS for legal, and hold on a second, let me get to the right thing. What they do is create workflow, and it's stitched into LeanLaw, meaning it takes a little bit of a lift, but what they do is trying to get this site to work. What that does is it creates a custom workflow to stage your Microsoft 365 environment around matter creation and matter work. So what I mean by that is every time, I think I even have it here, so I might have taken off my computer, but when you open a Word document, let me just open a blank document, and I'm creating a document and I go to save it, they have software on their platform called DMS Legal that has already staged client matter architecture. So I have a client called Jorge, and under Jorge, I have a series of emails and workflows that I created. That's part of their onboarding process. That's part of their scripting process. It's baked into Outlook. It's baked into Word, it's baked now getting in Teams, but I can then take that file and essentially put it in whatever bucket that I want. And I can go look for it in whatever bucket I want, and I can see the matters I want. So it's deeply integrated workflow automation around the management of email and document management. And when a client is onboarded to LeanLaw in this integration, that client, I don't have a great demo of it, or else I'd show you. I just showed that one little screen. That client and matter is then created in the Microsoft 360 environment. So onboard a client to LeanLaw, financially set them up. So it's, it's the Elizabeth Rogers client and she's doing a lease agreement. That then pushes over into the Microsoft environment. So in Outlook or in Word, you can immediately tag emails, tag documents, and they go in the right folder structure along the way. And so that creates a document and it creates a data architecture for the law firm around client matter architecture. And the connection between LeanLaw and Epona is seamless. So you onboard that client and boom, it goes downstream. It sometimes creeps into a little bit of practice management around calendar and task management, but it's not great at that. It's fundamentally about documents and emails and organizing them in a folder structure and then having some insights. They're moving towards a 365, a pure online 365 product, but they've been a little slow. So if you have a firm that likes to work in Word and Outlook as apps, it lends itself really well to that. I actually think I might have it in my Outlook. Let's see if I can pull that up. I've just had some of their software, see if it comes up. Yeah, so let me share my screen one more time. So I showed you kind of what it looked like when you had a Word document. So as you see here, you've got this DMS for legal. So if I get this email, here's something I spent 20 bucks on Disney, I can then just drop this right into, some folder, this same Jorge test matter folder and bring it right in, just drag that right into the folder under email, and that's now filed. And so now everyone on the team has access to it. I think it's okay. I mean, I'd rather see something, I think there's some different interfaces that I don't want to disparage them. I think that they do some things really, really good. I'm really excited for them to get the 365 environment up. I thought there's something up here, I thought. So it just allows you to have that baked in structure, and it's highly customized to that client. So part of what they do is they charge a very low amount monthly. I think it's somewhere between $5 and $10 per user per month. So it's not a very heavy lift because you're leveraging 365 as your document storage, your email management. They make a little bit of money in the onboarding because they script it. And why Jay likes it is Jay gets that client and, creates his document, stages it, client matter. Now he can look across the whole firm, see documents, see email structure, just unified that data without having to buy a document management system because it's all in, the 365 environment. They didn't have to go get, NetDocs or some other tool like that. They just leverage what they already owned, but just put a data layer. But they work in the offline apps of Word and Outlook. They don't work in the 365 online environment. And that's where I think the next phase of Epona will go. Jeff, does that kind of at least give you a sense of what that is?
Yeah, I just hadn't reached out to him at all, but I'd seen it mentioned a couple of times, and I heard you say it, and I just was like, just quick synopsis. Yeah. What does it even do, and what is it? So yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah, cool. Andrew, it's good to see you. Thank you for stopping over. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Jeff, thanks for your interaction. And Lee, you're here, but you're quiet, but I appreciate your presence. And especially after tax day to show up here. And Elizabeth, thank you for inviting me.
All right, I guess we'll end the session if nobody else has any questions or comments. No. Andrew, Jeff, Lee, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. All right, Andrew, good talking to you. I'll be in touch.
Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.